Good evening and welcome to the closing night of Bristol Palestine Film Festival. So Leila Sansour will join us for the Q&A this evening, and so will director Ahmed Damon, whose film Forbidden Pilgrimage was also at the festival and covered similar topics. So we'll have both of them on the panel after the film. Thank you, Ahmed. First of all, let me begin by thanking you both for making the trip to Bristol and joining the film festival. I'll give a brief introduction and ask one question, and then I'm really looking forward to hearing your questions about the film and about Bethlehem more widely. So Ahmed Damon is director of two films, Forbidden Pilgrimage and Redstone, and he also is the content editor for This Week in Palestine, and so you can look out for all of those pieces of work actually online. And Forbidden Pilgrimage is a film that looks at the Israel control, if you like, of pilgrimage sites in Bethlehem and in Palestine. So it's very relevant to the topic we've seen in Open Bethlehem. And Leila Sansour is the director of Open Bethlehem, which you've just watched, and also Jeremy Hardy versus the Israeli Army. And as you saw on the film, she's the CEO of Open Bethlehem, the international campaign to keep Bethlehem open to the world. So I'm just going to begin by Leila asking you a question. So the film took, is it five years to make, or seven years to make?
Well, to make it took about 10 years.
Okay.
Like 9. Okay, so 9 years. Yeah.
So can you talk us through some of the challenges of making the film and why so long?
Yeah. Well, it's one of these films where the story began being one thing and was turned on its head and became something else entirely. I mean, I initially went to Bethlehem thinking that I will film for 1 year, and I already thought that I'm taking a whole year out of my life in London, to film the Israel building the wall in the city. The idea at the time was that we expected Israel to complete the wall pretty much within 1 year, and this is why I chose that year and chose to stay for 1 year. But of course, as many things of that kind, the situation very quickly got under my skin, and we started Open Bethlehem. And then you get trapped in a way, or initially it didn't feel like I am trapped. Initially I felt, well, I decided now 2 years. Then I decided 3 years. On the 4th year, I felt, well, how do I disentangle myself from this? I have no money for the film. I had no money for the campaign. But I was completely sort of the only person who could juggle both or do anything with both. So for 2 years, I struggled with the campaign and trying to keep it going. And then I realized that actually, at whatever cost, I will have to complete the film. And the idea became clear to me that in the end, we cannot be supported, and we cannot, and we do need a strong tool to explain the situation in Bethlehem, to invite audiences to join us on this journey, both in terms of maybe backing us to send the message further, so that we're not relying on some kind of Palestine foreign aid agencies, but on people, friends, philanthropists in the world. But also to have a tool, a tool that explains the situation in Bethlehem and brings it to people's attentions. So that's what I did. Then I had to dedicate 2 years to work and fund my film and to finish it. Mm-hmm. And so this is why it took so long.
Mm-hmm. And Ahmed, how does that resonate with you in terms of your film didn't take 10 years to make, but...
Yeah, it took 1 year to make. First, I would like to add my voice to the Open Bethlehem campaign. I hope it spreads to the other Palestinian cities and it becomes Open Palestine. Recently, the Palestinian passport was ranked amongst the lowest in the world in terms of access. So I wish more for the Bethlehem passport, more luck. And I would think that it's... when you actually live in Bethlehem and the other cities, in Bethlehem, Jerusalem, and Nazareth, where I made my film, the situation in Nazareth, although it's not a physical wall, but there is an invisible wall also there, despite being inside Israel. But it's also suffering from most of the problems in which Bethlehem is suffering in terms of pilgrimage coming. So the short visits, only 45 minutes to the to the Nativity Church and back, and not interaction with the community of Christians and and Palestinians and Muslims living in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think just to add to your comment, the idea of using Bethlehem for me and for everybody involved.
It's a personal thing also. Yeah.
It was personal, but at the same time, it's not because we want to focus on Bethlehem for Bethlehem's sake alone, but because we understand the value of Bethlehem's brand. It's an iconic city. It's a city that has resonance with many people in the world. And it's a city that opens doors, particularly in places like the United States, where maybe if I come as a Palestinian and the first thing I say, I want to talk to you about Palestine, people will not listen. But if I say, I want to talk to you about Bethlehem, they listen. And you end up by saying, and Bethlehem is Palestine. And all Palestinian cities are experiencing the same. So in many ways, it is simply a strategic choice as well as, you know, I was lucky that this is my city and this is the city I have access to and that I have history in. I suppose the other thing, why it was Bethlehem for me and why I particularly insisted on making a film about a city, Palestinian city, because somehow there is this stereotype of Palestinians, which actually I think serves Israeli purposes often, is that Palestinians almost are not rooted. They do not have these big institutions or cities that they've lived in, that they've formed, that the urban space that actually was globally connected, dynamic industries, dynamic economy. All this is always absent from Palestinian films for good reasons, because obviously your heart goes first to the very tragic situations, often to the refugees, and because of that, we've kind of lost perspective to how to communicate also to people that we are a rooted people. We are people who've been there for ages. We've been there in cities, and these cities are very, very valuable, not only to us, but to the Middle East and the wider world. Because cities like Bethlehem, where Muslims and Christians live together, Armenians have come and settled, Syriacs came and settled, they are very important spaces of diversity and openness in this region. And without this kind of social fabric, I cannot see a good future for Palestine and a good future for the Middle East. So the erosion of cities like Bethlehem and this kind of callousness with which Israel treats Bethlehem should really be alarming to everybody around the world. It's alarming to us because we're going to pay the price as a society, not only just in terms of the human rights abuses, but what is the future? What is the future if we lose every city like this for us? But I think everyone in the world should also worry about that too.
Thank you. So we have two very articulate guests here tonight. So you're going to have to get your questions in very quickly. If not, I'll keep asking.
So thank you very much. Very interesting film. Ben Gurion once said, the old will die and the young will forget. And you are a very good example because you lived a long time outside Palestine, yet after succeeding elsewhere, having a very normal life that you didn't have to deal with the war or with any difficulties. You had very little families still left in Bethlehem, but then you felt you wanted to come back. Was it a conscious decision? Was it subconscious? What happened that you decided I wanted to do this film?
I suppose maybe you put your finger on something important, that when we do something, we may be telling ourselves one thing, but maybe subconsciously we are actually being driven by a different force. And I suspect that there was something within me that wanted to reconnect with Palestine. It doesn't mean that I planned that I will go back and stay 8 years in Iran, but I did, I suppose, when you, as a young person, I wanted to be in big cities. I thought, I want a big life, don't want the life of a small town. But when you grow older and, you're a mature person, you realize that if you want to be creative, especially in my field, like a creative person, a person who I don't think it's, I think of life as a more interesting option if you part of the forces that shape the world, shape life. And so when you face that, you realize that somehow it is very difficult to be a really active participant in the creation of the world if you do not have your own sort of nation base, and that hits you very strongly, that you have to have that confidence to speak collectively from if you wish, a collective pad where you can launch yourself. So maybe, yes, of course, there was maybe another force that drove me to Palestine. And I don't regret it at all. In fact, I'm very grateful to my father, who maybe I felt I owed him something, and this is why I went. But I'm very grateful to him to have brought me back to Palestine. Because I have to say that my experience in Bethlehem, as painful as it was, it also is the greatest experience I will think I ever have living on this earth. It was greater than living in London, living in New York, being in Paris. It was such an incredible thing to experience, to be part of trying to make a better world. So.
And sort of while we're contemplating.
Actually, I have a question for Leila.
Go
if you
ahead.
don't mind.
Why not?
So basically, Carol had to leave, and now I assume you don't have relatives anymore in Bethlehem, and from the people that you met when you started in 2006, how many of them, especially the Christian community, left? And what do you assume to be the future looking like in the coming years? Would the Nativity Church become a museum for foreigners, empty of its local inhabitants?
Yeah. So since I've kind of relocated myself to Palestine, or at least in the very least relocated the center of gravity in my life to Palestine, pretty much the majority of people I met on the way left. Some because they are like me, transient, in the sense that you'll stay several years, but then you cannot continue and you leave. Carol was very tragic because obviously she never wanted to leave, and she just had to. And of course, everyone leaves with the view that I will come back, and then you know that they won't. Quite a few people from members of the board that you see, 3 people left the country. But the good news for me is that I still have one relative left in town, because my other cousin, who you saw, cry and, sort of very, very loudly and she was very upset when she was leaving. She actually 3 years later managed to make her way back into the country, and she's now living in Palestine. So I do have one relative, which is very great. About the Christian community, I think the Christian community really is walking a very thin line now. If things continue as they are, it's very difficult to imagine how the community could be sustainable, and it could become unsustainable very, very soon. So I know that the audiences in Britain maybe will think, oh, well, the hell with the Christian community, it doesn't matter. But the problem is, one is obviously, in the very least, I think it is tragic to do that to a people, to do it to a culture. Christians are a very, very interesting link to biblical times, because some of their lifestyle and their insight maybe into the life and word of the Bible is very, very different and very alive today, because we actually mimic the lifestyle, sometimes mimics lifestyle of the Bible. There's a whole heritage in terms of what is sung in the church, the liturgy, it's a whole culture. It's a destruction of a whole culture, destroying Christians in Palestine, not only of the faith in the land of its birth. And furthermore, it is a destruction of a diverse society in Palestine. It's making a society that's more homogeneous, less capable of having global link, global outlook. It's very important for us to have diversity. I love living alongside Muslims, but I would like Christians to stay. So it's a very, very important and tragic and scary development. So all we can say is that we are hoping to play our role, like many others are trying now, to safeguard Bethlehem against this kind of depletion. And we are hoping that taking the film widely, taking it to the United States, maybe they are a little bit cowboy and gung-ho there. So hopefully, for a change, the gung-ho and cowboy attitude might help us a little bit.
Can I also add something to this? This is coming from a Muslim living in Palestine, in the city of Ramallah. I am very much sure that this is part of the Israeli plan, because I am very confident, and that's why I made also my film, that once Palestine, and God forbid, is emptied of its original Christians, Palestinians living in Palestine, there will be no hope for a Palestinian cause anymore. And because the Christian Palestinians are the, let's say, the difficult number for the Zionist propaganda, which is giving us the wrong impression that what's happening in Palestine is a conflict between the Jews and the Muslims. But in fact, it's a conflict between the Zionist idea and the local population, the Muslims, the Christian, and the Jews, who are the small community of Jews who live in Palestine, in near Nablus, who are all this part of the community. But suddenly in the media, it's turned into this polar thing, which has nothing to do with reality.
They're all coming now.
Hello there. Thank you very much for coming to Bristol and showing us your films. So there's an audience of about 100 people in here, and we've come to see your films, which is what you want to happen. What do you want us to do now? Now we've come to see your film. How can we help? What do you want from us?
Yes. Thank you very much for this question, and I like people who ask this question. So I think there's different ways in which people can help, obviously. Before I say maybe the concrete things, I want to remind everybody that you should always keep it in front of your eyes that our problem is a political problem. We're not a deluge problem, situation, or humanitarian disaster or crisis. So most importantly, we need a solution. So and political pressure. So writing to your MPs, writing seriously to your MPs. I know that people keep saying that, but at the same time, people are always lazy, I know, to write to their MPs, including myself. I know that, yeah. So try and, for a change, write to your MP and tell them that you, for example, saw this film, it's terrible, and explain why, explain that it's an urgent situation, it needs intervention, it needs help, But from our side, we are hoping to turn you all into members of our movement, into citizens of Bethlehem. There's information outside for you to figure out how to contact us and how to keep informed about our programs. Currently, we are still thinking about the easiest way to make the ability to own a passport and to be part of the movement accessible to more people. But currently, we're doing it by running workshops. We run workshops in London. We did one in Glasgow. We'll be willing to come to Bristol, where we spend a day maybe telling you more about Bethlehem, sharing with you materials that you can use or find useful to advocate for the city. We have maps, stills that you can allow your local journalists to access. We have presentations that can be projected, slides, So we can give you a whole load of materials and information and a backup in your effort to do small things. You don't have to do many things. I would encourage you all to, if you still haven't sent all your Christmas cards, to mention us in your Christmas cards to your friends this year, and to mention the film, and to mention the situation in Bethlehem to your friends this year. The other thing, of course, and this is maybe a more difficult one, I very, very much encourage each one of you to visit Bethlehem, because I think it is maybe a difficult task, but at the same time, I think we are being tucked away from the world. We are incarcerated by a wall, but it is up to you to open our city in the meantime, to build a bridge with our city, and to keep the traffic going, and to keep our relationship with the outside world going. And by visiting, you become a much more articulate and better ambassador, because you will see it with your own eyes, and you will encourage other people who know you to go. So it's very, very important for us that people continue coming and that they act as ambassadors. So in a way, again, to go back to the passport invitation to hold the passport, it is a way of building a movement, building a network of ambassadors for Bethlehem who think strategically like us, who are working for Palestine but understand the value of our strategy, and that we can always remain connected. You will know about other people who are doing things on that basis, and so that we also can act collectively in critical situations when that's needed. So.
Yes, and also, I think the sad part is that the Palestinians are drained out of options because of the lives and situations they are living. We as Palestinians are drained, and not in a third person way.
Mm-hmm.
But the efforts that are done from outside have been more effective in their impact. And I was happy after my film was released to be contacted by Irish activists who have finally won a case in which they were able to force the Irish tourism agencies to work directly with the Palestinian tourist agents without going only to the Israeli ones. And this breaks the current program in which the Palestinian tourist agencies are only the secondary medium that are hired by the Israelis only for a short trip or tour. And these tours should be called the Palestinian tours and not the alternative tours, because they are made by the locals.
Yeah, they're not alternative.
And I could add as well that I mean, Bristol's got quite a strong connection with Palestine in lots of different ways. We have football teams that go over there, Circus to Palestine, the Palestinian Museum, active solidarity campaign, university scholarships for Palestinians studying in the West Bank. So one of the things we were trying to do with the passport was to invite the Mayor of Bristol to accept a passport on behalf. And I think that invitation is still open. So if with some support from the audience tonight, if you want to sort of, those of you who have connections with the mayor, you know, just gently remind him that it might be a nice idea and a good idea to accept that invitation. He has, of course, got back to us, and we're still in conversation, but a little bit of help is always welcome.
By the way, also in our brochure, which you can find outside, we do try and list all the tour operators that do take people on trips that are either fact-finding trips or pilgrimage trips, but ones that work with Palestinian tour operators where you can stay in Palestine, Bethlehem. And we want to grow this list so that we can always inform people about also groups that run that in their own location. And maybe, for example, if you do take football groups, maybe we need to list you too.
Only if you've got teams that are bad enough.
We'll work with that.
Yeah, okay.
Leila, thanks for the film and its passion. I'm Israeli, and I'm part of an organization called Combatants for Peace. And one of the elephants in the room is taking the occupation out of Israel. And really taking, my good friend in Tulkarem says that the only way this occupation will end, which is what I want more than anything else in the world, is to take the occupation out of the Israeli hearts. And the truth of the matter, another friend of mine and yours, Jeff Halper, says that 90% of Israelis have no idea what's going on beyond the wall.
Yeah.
So the education of Israelis is top on my agenda. And top on my agenda because I think that it's possible to change. And I really live in hope that that's possible. So in terms of what can be done, I think it's fantastic to engage with Palestine and with Bethlehem. And the international community has done that quite a lot. And on the further extreme side of that has ostracized so many Jews and Israelis in the process and lost them in the cause. And we need to engage Israelis. We need to consider it as a binational struggle, not a uninational struggle. And I applaud the uninational solidarity and their work, and I will support everything I can within Bethlehem, across Palestine, which is what I do all the time. And we need to include Israel in this conundrum.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's a question how we do that.
No, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, of course, this is quite a, on many levels a thorny issue in a variety of ways. But it's not that I disagree with you. And in a way, we have considered many times, and I know groups that consider the possibility of having a proper campaign within Israel run by Palestinians to reach out and explain many issues. But there is a side to things that where the question marks start arising is that we have had decades where we've lived side by side, and there were times where Israelis had more access to the Palestinians and we spent a lot of time with Israelis. But the Israeli project continued unchanged despite the conversations, despite the dialogue, so we have to ask ourselves the question: is that dialogue, is it a decisive tool, or are there other tools, unfortunately, that have to be used? And you said that in the international community, as it comes down maybe harder on Israel, is going to alienate some Israelis. But in a way, for us, the question is, well, we haven't won this battle. We haven't won this battle in a different way. So pressure from the international community is very important. At the same time, speaking to Israelis is important. I agree with you. And for us, speaking to Jewish people abroad is very important. And I always work with several Jewish groups trying to reach out to Jewish community leaders, decision makers, prominent Jews, who might play a major role as well, should they change their minds and attitudes or decide to become proactive. So I agree with you, and we're open to suggestions. How on earth do we speak to Israelis?
Just to say, dialogue for dialogue's sake is not effective.
Yeah.
I think every action which is in the direction of ending the occupation, I believe that persuading Israelis that the occupation exists, A, and
Yeah.
B, that it's a really bad thing for Israelis, is part of ending the occupation.
Yes.
That's my...
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we could do, but there's just too many voices within Israel today that drum the sort of, the voices of war up, because, and sadly for us, every time Israel is very quick and easy to impose the currency of violence on the situation. Once it imposes it, the whole area gets enveloped in a kind of a different, embroiled in a completely different battle where using the word security becomes such a simple thing for any Israeli politician to win over huge amounts of Israelis, and where we find it very difficult to, stake out a territory where we could speak a different language or talk about something different, because everybody seems to just be terrified and talking about security. And it's something that we don't. How do we remove that possibility? It's very difficult. But
We've got time for 2 or 3 more questions, but we'll take 2 together. That's okay. If there are 2. And one over here.
Hi Leila, thanks for the film, fantastic. Just to point out that I believe there's a new international music and arts festival in Bethlehem, happens in June. I think this next year will be the 3rd time it happens. I hope to go at some point next year or the year after, and that might be a good time to visit.
yes.
And I think the key in what you're doing is the symbol, Open Bethlehem. This symbolically, it's more powerful than the symbol of the wall, supposedly keeping people safe apart. And I think that's the thing to keep going, and follow through the implications, open in every sense.
Thank you. I think that was more of a...
Comment.
We'll take another question
another-
as well. Is there anyone else that
There was a lady here.
Hi Leila, thank you for your film. I was working in Bethlehem for 3 months last winter as an EA, and thank you for the film. What I wanted to ask is, towards the end of the film, it seemed quite bleak and running out of money and so on. And we've talked about what we can do. So where are you at now with the project, and what are your next steps?
Yeah. Another one, or shall I answer
Should we-
this?
yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for asking this question. We are at a point where we are currently touring the UK with the film, and in a way we're using the UK as a launching pad for the whole idea and the project, because we want to be much more confident and much more, if you wish, perfect in every way in terms of what materials we have, what our understanding of audiences and what they would expect from us before we go to the States. We're also very much hoping that we will use our tour of the UK, which will probably continue throughout January and February, to get backers, to build backers of our campaign, both among people who can support us financially, or those who understand our strategy and will be willing to give us funds towards a really proper, ambitious campaign in the States. We don't want to go to the States to again shake the hands of a couple of priests and come back. We want to go to the States and bring this film to every corner, every church, every decision maker, every congressman who might be the kind of the right person who might be reached in this way. So we want people to understand our ambition and to join us. And if foreign donors cannot support us, people, if you donate today £1, £5, if a million people support us, I think we can really take the States in a way that has not been done before. We can go to the States and really, really work on a serious campaign there that might pay very, very unusual and unseen before dividends. So that's the idea.
Okay, that was our last question, because I've already gone 15 minutes over.
No, okay.
And just before, did you want to say anything about outside in the foyer?
Just to say that will be around here for a short time, not the whole night, but we'll be around if you want to speak to us or interested in anything specific. Julia, as well, is a coordinator of the campaign in the UK, so she will be around, and you can.
And I can just add quickly that Forbidden Pilgrimage, for those who were not able to see it on Tuesday, on Thursday, there is a short version of the film is now online as part of a project called Palestine Remix, and also my first film, which was shown last year in Bristol, called The Redstone, is also now online as part of a festival called Culture Unplugged. So please, it's one click away, and it's based. The awards are based on the number of clicks. So just a click away, as it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll click. Okay. Don't worry.
We had that experience before. Thank you. So that's it for the festival. Thank you to Leila and Amir for joining us, and thank you for you and your questions.